What do you do when the very thing meant to save you is what's killing you? What happens when the people paid millions to find the answer are blind to it? Let me tell you, sometimes the person you ignore, the one you treat like a piece of furniture, is the only one who sees the goddamn truth. If you love stories where the underdog shoves the truth down the throats of the arrogant, then you're in the right place. Smash that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated? 20 of the world's most brilliant medical minds couldn't save the billionaire slowly rotting away in his $4 million hospital suite. But the woman who mopped their floors? She saw exactly what they missed. Victor Blackwell was dying. It was a slow, ugly, and obscenely expensive process. Inside the ultra-exclusive wing of Sterling Heights Medical Center, a place where money bought the illusion of immortality, machines beeped a frantic, useless rhythm. An army of specialists, men with degrees from Harvard and Yale hanging like trophies on their office walls, frowned at charts and muttered incomprehensible jargon. They were the best. They were stumped. And death, unimpressed by their pedigrees, was creeping closer. Into this theater of medical failure slipped Angela Beaumont, as invisible as the sterile air. The night shift was her domain, a kingdom of shadows and silence where fewer eyes existed to look straight through her. She moved with an efficiency born from a life of never having enough. Enough time, enough money, enough sleep. At 38, she was a single mother, a ghost in a blue uniform. She pushed her cart down the polished corridor, the squeak of its wheels the only announcement of her presence. The air in Blackwell's suite was a cocktail of antiseptic, the faint, expensive cologne clinging to his silk sheets, and something else. Something wrong. A subtle metallic tang that coiled in the back of her throat. Her mind, a place where dormant chemistry knowledge lay filed away but never forgotten, jolted with a terrifying recognition. She froze mid-wipe, her hand hovering over a mahogany panel designed to hide a ventilator. Her eyes, trained to notice the details others missed, scanned the man in the bed. It wasn't just his sallow skin or the shallow, ragged breaths. It was the specific, almost jaundiced yellowing of his fingernails, the peculiar, patchy pattern of his hair loss. Not the typical male baldness, but something more alien, more sinister. And then she saw it. A subtle, almost imperceptible discoloration along his gums. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the quiet hum of the machines. The pieces clicked into place, forming an image as clear and horrifying as a slide under a microscope. The metallic scent, the neuropathy they kept mentioning in their hushed conferences, the gastrointestinal chaos, the alopecia. It wasn't a cascade of mysterious, unrelated symptoms. It was a classic textbook presentation. Angela Beaumont knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, exactly what poison was killing Victor Blackwell. But who in God's name would listen to a housekeeper when 20 of the world's most celebrated doctors were failing? Sterling Heights Medical Center wasn't just a hospital, it was a monument to wealth. The luxury wing, where Victor Blackwell was a long-term resident, felt more like a Four Seasons hotel than a medical facility. The equipment was state-of-the-art, but it was discreetly hidden behind polished wood and ambient lighting. The tech billionaire had paid a fortune for this privacy, demanding America's top diagnostic minds convene to solve the riddle of his mysterious decline. And for all their brilliance, they were getting nowhere. Angela continued her methodical dusting, her movements economical, a habit formed from years of racing the clock to get home to her kids. She was invisible, and she used it to her advantage. Her eyes missed nothing. While the doctors saw a collection of baffling symptoms, Angela saw a pattern. She categorized, she analyzed, she connected dots they hadn't even noticed were on the page. 10 feet away, Dr. Thaddeus Reynolds addressed his team. He was the archetype of medical authority. Silver-haired, Harvard-educated, with a resonant voice that never needed to be raised to command a room. He exuded an aura of intellectual superiority that intimidated patients and junior doctors alike. "Gentlemen, we've exhausted conventional pathways," he announced, his tone crisp with frustration. "Mr. Blackwell's symptoms continue to defy standard diagnosis. His liver function is deteriorating at an alarming rate. The neurological symptoms are worsening. We must begin to consider more exotic approaches." Angela kept her head down, her focus seemingly on a stubborn smudge on a glass tabletop, but her ears were wide open. It was a skill she'd perfected back in college, absorbing complex chemistry lectures while taking meticulous notes, long before life had violently intervened and ripped her from that path. 15 years ago, Angela had been the star of the chemistry department at Johns Hopkins, a scholarship student on a fast track to a career in medical research. She had a gift, a way of seeing the world as a series of intricate chemical reactions. Then came the phone call, the screech of tires on wet pavement, and a car accident that left her 2 parents dead and her 3 younger siblings needing someone to raise them. She withdrew from her honors program mid-semester, making a promise to herself and her professors that she would return. It was a promise she had never been able to keep. "The cleaning staff needs to finish up quickly," Dr. Reynolds said, his gaze flicking past Angela as if she were a lamp. His words weren't addressed to her, but at her, a verbal dismissal that erased her from the room. "We have important matters to discuss." Angela nodded, her face a neutral mask, hiding the familiar bitter sting. They saw the uniform, not the mind inside it. They saw her function, not her potential. She had never let go of her passion, though. She devoured library books, watched online lectures during her lunch breaks, and read scientific journals she could access through the hospital's public Wi-Fi. She had the knowledge, just not the credentials. As she wiped down the surfaces near his bed, her eyes caught a glimpse of Blackwell's chart. The words leaped out at her: peripheral neuropathy, alopecia, severe digestive issues. They were classic presentations, but the specialists were so focused on finding a single exotic disease that they were misattributing them to separate, unrelated conditions. They were looking for a unicorn, while a horse was kicking down the barn door. Dr. Reynolds swept past, his expensive suit jacket brushing her aside without a hint of acknowledgement. Angela instinctively stepped back, melting into the background, becoming part of the furniture. "He walks past me every single day like I'm part of the wall," she thought, a flicker of anger hardening her resolve. "That's why he'll never notice what I see." Her gaze shifted from the chart to Blackwell's personal items, meticulously arranged on the bathroom counter. Expensive grooming products, a testament to a life of curated luxury. Her eyes landed on a particular jar of hand cream. It was an exclusive, imported brand. She noted its position. It had been moved since she'd cleaned yesterday. Not just used, but repositioned. Someone had made a point of moving it. Angela filed the tiny observation away. In chemistry, the smallest, most insignificant inconsistency often held the key to the entire equation. The suite door swished open, and a man in a perfectly tailored suit entered. His visitor badge identified him as Jefferson Burke. Angela recognized him instantly from business magazines. He was Blackwell's biggest rival, the Pepsi to his Coke, a man he had battled in the marketplace for years. Now, in a twist of public relations genius, Burke was playing the role of the supportive friend during his rival's tragic illness. "Victor's resting," Dr. Reynolds informed him, his voice softening with the deference reserved for the wealthy. "His condition, I'm afraid, has not improved." "I brought his favorite hand cream," Burke replied, his voice smooth as silk. He placed an elegant black jar on the nightstand, identical to the one in the bathroom. Imported from Switzerland. It's a small comfort, I know, but he insists it's the only brand that doesn't irritate his sensitive skin. Angela watched, unseen, from the hallway. She noted how Burke positioned the jar, turning the label just so, ensuring it was prominent, that it would be seen and used. There was something in the careful, deliberate placement that triggered her analytical mind. It was too precise, too insistent. A performance for an audience that didn't know it was watching a show. Later, while cleaning an adjacent utility closet, Angela overheard two residents discussing Blackwell's case in hushed, frustrated tones. "Strangest symptom progression I've ever seen," the first one said. "It's like he has 5 different diseases at once. Nothing connects." "Reynolds is convinced it's some kind of rare autoimmune cascade," replied the second. "But the tests keep coming back inconsistent. Meanwhile, the richest man in the tech world gets weaker and weaker while we chase our own tails." Angela paused, the mop handle cold in her hands. She was connecting the fragments in her mind. The jumbled symptoms that weren't jumbled at all. The mysterious decline. The ever-present, expensive hand cream delivered by a business rival. A hypothesis, wild and terrifying, began to form. But it was just a theory. She needed more. She needed to observe. That night she adjusted her cleaning schedule. She made sure to be in Blackwell's room during the quiet hours, when he was sleeping and the day staff was gone. She studied the updates on his chart, memorizing the new data, the latest lab results. With every new symptom noted, her suspicion grew stronger. The pattern was becoming unmistakable. A flashing red light visible only to someone with her specific, forgotten knowledge. As her shift ended, Angela stared at her own reflection in the cracked mirror of the employee bathroom. She saw the drab uniform, practical and forgettable. She saw a tired face, etched with worry lines, but her eyes were still sharp, still bright with the intelligence that life had tried so hard to extinguish. She saw the invisible barrier that separated her world of mops and bleach from their world of stethoscopes and prestige. "They don't see me," she whispered to her reflection, "but I see everything." The piercing shriek of alarms erupted at 2:17 a.m. A voice over the intercom, tight with urgency, announced a code blue in the Blackwell suite. Angela, cleaning the room next door, heard the thunder of footsteps as doctors and nurses rushed past. Victor Blackwell had taken a sudden, catastrophic turn. Her work forgotten, she crept to the doorway, her heart pounding in her chest. Through the partially opened door, she watched the controlled chaos unfold. "Liver enzymes are critical. Kidney function is dropping fast. Neurological responses are minimal," a young resident reported, his voice cracking under the pressure. Dr. Reynolds strode into the room, his authority radiating like a physical force. "Run a full toxicology panel again, now. Something is causing this cascade failure, and I want to know what it is." Angela edged closer, drawn by a mixture of human concern and cold, scientific curiosity. The medical team worked with frantic precision. Monitors beeped a symphony of impending doom. Nurses rushed in with crash carts and syringes. "Could it be environmental?" suggested Dr. Park, a younger physician on the team, his face pale with stress. "Something in his food, his water, his personal products?" Dr. Reynolds shot him a look that could curdle milk. "We've tested everything in this room twice, Doctor. Focus on medical possibilities, not amateur detective work." Dr. Park visibly shrank back, silenced. The team continued their urgent interventions, managing to pull Blackwell back from the brink, stabilizing him for now. As the immediate crisis subsided and the doctors dispersed to consult and analyze the new data, Angela saw her chance. She slipped into the room under the guise of her duties. She first checked his chart, memorizing the new alarming symptoms. Then, her eyes went back to the bathroom counter. To the hand cream. Something about the way the fluorescent light caught the metallic sheen of the product on Blackwell's nightstand triggered a specific, vivid memory from her university days. A lecture slide in a toxicology course, a discussion of heavy metal poisoning, thallium. She moved closer to the bed, her breath held tight in her chest. She examined Blackwell's fingernails under the harsh light. The discoloration, the subtle pattern. It was distinctive. The unique quality of his hair loss, the abdominal pain that had been dismissed as a digestive issue. She inhaled sharply, a gasp of pure, horrified certainty. The symptoms didn't just match thallium poisoning. They were a perfect textbook case, exactly as it had been described in her old toxicology textbook. How? How could 20 of the country's top specialists have missed something so classically presented? Her mind raced. She had to tell someone. She hesitated, then approached Sarah, a night nurse with whom she'd built a friendly, if superficial, rapport over shared coffee breaks. "Excuse me, Sarah," Angela said quietly, trying to keep her voice from shaking. "I know this is going to sound crazy, but has anyone checked Mr. Blackwell for thallium poisoning? His symptoms, they match it exactly." Sarah's expression, usually friendly, curdled into one of patronizing dismissal. "Angela, I know you mean well, but please, these are the top specialists in the country. They've run every test imaginable." "But the pattern," Angela started, desperate to make her understand. "If you're done eavesdropping on medical conferences, the bathroom floor needs cleaning," Sarah interrupted, her voice turning cold and sharp. "Leave the medicine to the doctors." Angela stepped back as if slapped, her cheeks burning with humiliation. She returned to her cart, the familiar crushing weight of dismissal settling on her shoulders. But beneath the sting of rejection, her certainty crystallized into something hard and unshakable. She knew what was killing Victor Blackwell. The only question now was, would she be willing to risk her job, the only thing keeping her family afloat, to make someone listen? As she wheeled her cart down the long, sterile corridor, her thoughts were a whirlwind. The symptoms aligned perfectly. The progressive neurological issues, the digestive problems, the distinctive hair loss. In her undergraduate toxicology course, thallium was called the poisoner's poison because it was colorless, odorless, easily absorbed through skin contact, and its symptoms mimicked a dozen other conditions, making it incredibly difficult to detect unless you were specifically looking for it. And they weren't looking for it. She completed her shift on autopilot, her mind miles away, focused on Blackwell's declining health. When she got home to her tiny apartment, she didn't sleep. She pulled an old, dog-eared textbook from the small collection she had salvaged from her college days. She found the chapter on heavy metal poisoning and read it again and again. It confirmed everything. Thallium. The next morning, Angela arrived at the hospital early, a grim determination setting her features. She had to find a way. She watched from a distance as Jefferson Burke made his daily visit, another fresh jar of the exclusive hand cream in hand. The routine was sickeningly familiar. He would insist it was the only brand Blackwell would use, and he would even personally apply some to the dying man's hands, a gesture of feigned care that was, in reality, a perfect delivery system for a slow, deliberate poisoning. What would you do? Would you risk everything for a man you don't know? For a truth no one wants to hear? Let me know your thoughts below. Angela weighed her options. A direct confrontation would get her fired on the spot. She needed evidence, hard, irrefutable proof that even the arrogant Dr. Reynolds couldn't ignore. She made her decision. Victor Blackwell was running out of time, and she was the only person on Earth who knew why. Angela knew time was a luxury Victor Blackwell no longer had. During her break, She used a public computer in the hospital library to cross-reference her suspicions. Every search, every medical journal article confirmed her theory. The specific pattern of hair loss, the peripheral neuropathy progressing upwards from the feet, the gastrointestinal distress. It all screamed thallium. But how was it getting into his system? And why hadn't their vaunted toxicology screens picked it up? She scribbled a note on a piece of hospital stationery, her handwriting neat and precise. Check for thallium poisoning. Classic presentation. She slipped into Dr. Reynolds's empty office while cleaning and left it squarely in the middle of his clipboard. It was a long shot, a desperate, anonymous plea. The next morning she positioned her cart near the doctor's meeting room, pretending to polish a brass sign. The door was slightly ajar. She heard Dr. Reynolds's voice, dripping with derision. "And apparently," he said, and Angela could practically hear the condescending smirk, "our cleaning staff now has diagnostic opinions." A ripple of cruel laughter went through the room. "Someone left an anonymous note suggesting thallium poisoning," he continued. "We tested for heavy metals in the initial workup," another doctor responded, his voice flat. "Exactly. Standard procedure," Reynolds dismissed. "The cleaning staff is playing detective. What's next? They'll be scrubbing in for surgery?" Angela's chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. Her hands gripped the handle of her cleaning cart, her knuckles turning white. The humiliation stung, but Blackwell's life mattered more than her pride. She had to find another way. She formulated a new plan. Dr. Park, the younger physician who had suggested an environmental cause, seemed more open-minded, less steeped in the hospital's rigid hierarchy. She timed her afternoon cleaning schedule to intercept him in a quiet hallway. "Excuse me, Dr. Park," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I know this is inappropriate, but regarding Mr. Blackwell, I strongly believe he's suffering from thallium poisoning. The symptoms match perfectly." Dr. Park's expression shifted from surprise to acute discomfort. "That's an interesting theory, but as you heard, we've already tested for heavy metals." "Standard tests might miss it," Angela pressed, "especially if it's being administered consistently in small doses over a long period. It's in his hand cream, the one Mr. Burke brings." "I appreciate your concern," he interrupted, glancing at his watch, clearly desperate to escape the conversation. "But I really have to be somewhere. Perhaps you could mention it to one of the nurses." He walked away quickly, leaving Angela standing alone in the hallway, invisible once more. Her desperation was turning to dread. Later that evening, as she cleaned near the security desk, the head of security approached her. "Miss Beaumont," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument, "we've had reports of you, interfering with medical matters. This is your only warning. Know your boundaries, or there will be consequences." The threat was clear. She needed irrefutable proof, something even Dr. Reynolds couldn't dismiss, but getting it meant crossing lines that could cost her the job that fed her children. That night, alone in the stark light of the employee break room, Angela made her decision. Victor Blackwell had days, maybe hours, left. Her job security couldn't outweigh a human life. She formulated a new, terrifyingly risky plan, drawing on the deep well of chemistry knowledge that had lain dormant for 15 years. It would require common cleaning supplies, unauthorized access to a lab, and perfect split-second timing. Tomorrow she would force them to see what they'd missed, or she would lose everything trying. Jefferson Burke visited again that afternoon. His visit was brief, only 15 minutes, but he made sure the new jar of hand cream was prominently placed. Angela observed from the hallway as he encouraged the day nurse to apply it generously to Blackwell's dry hands and arms, a gesture of profound comfort and profound evil. After Burke left, Angela entered the suite to perform her routine cleaning. She carefully studied the cream's container. The expensive packaging was flawless, but the product itself. When she examined it closely, it had a faint, almost imperceptible metallic sheen. She had to get a sample. Taking it openly was impossible. She waited for the chaos of the nursing shift change, a brief window when the room would be momentarily unattended. With practiced efficiency, her movements swift and silent, she used a sterile cotton swab to transfer a small amount of the cream into a clean specimen container she'd borrowed from a supply room. The container vanished into the deep pocket of her uniform. That evening, Angela picked up her children from her neighbor's apartment. 12-year-old Marcus and 14-year-old Tasha were used to her exhaustion, to homework done without her help, to dinners they often had to prepare themselves when her shifts ran long. "Mom, are you okay?" Tasha asked, her perceptive eyes noting the deep-seated tension in her mother's face. "Just a complicated situation at work, honey," Angela replied, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Nothing for you to worry about." After the children were asleep, Angela spread her materials across the small kitchen table. Her old toxicology textbook, printouts from medical journals, and her own handwritten notes on Blackwell's symptoms. The pattern was undeniable. Why couldn't 20 specialists see it? Because they weren't looking for it. Because thallium poisoning was rare, archaic, a relic of Cold War spy novels. Because they had run standard panels that would miss gradual cumulative exposure. Because they couldn't conceive of a billionaire being slowly murdered by a trusted friend. And because, most of all, no one listened to the housekeeper. Angela stared at her blue uniform hanging on the back of the door. It was the physical embodiment of her invisibility. Tomorrow she would risk everything to tear that cloak of invisibility to shreds. She would force them to see both the poison and the person who had found it. She arrived early for her shift, carrying a small, innocuous bag alongside her usual supplies. Inside were baking soda, aluminum foil, and a few small glass containers from the cafeteria. To anyone else, they were random items. To a chemist, combined with standard cleaning solutions, they were the ingredients for a rudimentary but effective test for thallium. First, she needed to confirm the progression. During the morning rounds, she timed her cleaning to overhear the doctor's discussion of Blackwell's latest symptoms. The neuropathy was worse, now affecting his speech. The distinctive hair loss pattern was more pronounced. He was deteriorating rapidly, even with their supportive care. It was now or never. In a cramped, windowless maintenance closet, Angela worked quickly, her hands steady, her mind clear. She mixed the solutions with a practiced precision that felt like a ghost of her former life. The makeshift chemistry setup, a glass jar over a can of sterno, was a world away from the sophisticated equipment in the hospital's main lab. Yet the principles were the same. She had performed similar tests in university labs, earning top marks for her accuracy and resourcefulness. She introduced the sample of hand cream. She watched. And she waited. Then it happened. The telltale color change, the formation of a specific precipitate, a positive reaction for thallium. She quickly photographed the results with her cheap smartphone. Next, she went to the nurse's station and, under the pretense of looking for a cleaning schedule, reviewed Blackwell's visitor log. The pattern was damning. Jefferson Burke's visits, always bringing the same gift, correlated perfectly with the escalation of Blackwell's symptoms. At 2 p.m., she overheard a nurse say there was an emergency conference in Blackwell's suite. All 20 specialists would be there. His condition had become critical. It was her moment. She changed into a freshly laundered uniform, straightened her name badge, and gathered her evidence. The photo of the positive test result, a copy of the visitor logs, her timeline of his symptoms, and the printouts from the medical journals. She rehearsed her explanation in her mind, drawing on toxicology knowledge she had memorized years ago. The doctors were gathered in Blackwell's suite, the tension in the room thick enough to taste. Dr. Reynolds stood at the center, grimly presenting the latest failed interventions. Angela knocked once, firmly, and entered without waiting for permission. 20 pairs of startled, annoyed eyes turned toward her. Dr. Reynolds's expression curdled from surprise to pure irritation. "This is a closed medical conference. The cleaning can wait." "Mr. Blackwell is dying of thallium poisoning," Angela stated, her voice ringing out, clear and steady, belying the frantic pounding of her heart. "And I can prove it." Dr. Reynolds's face hardened. "Security," he began, reaching for the phone. "The symptoms match perfectly," Angela continued, stepping forward and laying her evidence on the conference table with a defiant slap. "Progressive ascending peripheral neuropathy, distinctive alopecia, abdominal pain, cognitive decline. It is a classical presentation." She pointed to the photo on her phone. "I confirmed the presence of thallium in his hand cream. The imported Chamberlain brand he uses every day. It's being absorbed through his skin. He's being slowly poisoned and has been for months." "This is absurd," Dr. Reynolds snapped, his face flushing with anger. "You are a housekeeper, not a physician." "I was a chemistry honors student at Johns Hopkins before my life took a different path," Angela responded, her gaze locked on his, refusing to back down. "The poison is being introduced through the hand cream brought by Jefferson Burke during his regular visits. The timeline of his visits matches the progression of the symptoms perfectly." She laid out her evidence with methodical precision, pointing to the visitor logs, then to her chart of symptom progression. Her explanation was precise, scientific, and irrefutable, drawing on a depth of toxicology knowledge that left them stunned. "Your standard heavy metal panels would miss it," she explained, her voice gaining strength. "Because the poisoning is gradual. It's designed to maintain levels just below the typical detection thresholds of a broad-spectrum test. But the cumulative effects are textbook." A complete, shocked silence fell over the room. Dr. Reynolds opened his mouth to object again, then closed it, his eyes drawn against his will to the evidence she had laid out. Dr. Park, the young physician she had approached earlier, leaned forward, his eyes wide. "She's right," he whispered, almost to himself. It actually makes perfect sense with the symptom progression. The tests we ran, they might indeed miss gradual cumulative exposure." Another specialist, an older neurologist, nodded slowly. "The hair loss pattern and the nature of the neuropathy, it is consistent with thallium toxicity." The silence deepened as 20 brilliant minds were forced to confront the colossal truth of what they had missed, and, more shockingly, who had found it. "It's thallium poisoning," Angela concluded quietly, her voice the only sound in the room. "The symptoms are textbook. You just have to know what you're looking for." "Do you think they'll finally listen? Or will they try to bury her discovery to save their own careers? This is where it gets intense. If you're enjoying this, hit that like button to let me know." Angela stood firm as the doctors exchanged stunned glances. Her heart was a jackhammer against her ribs, but her exterior was pure composure. Her maintenance closet chemistry had been a wild gamble, crude by their standards, but it was based on sound principles she knew to be true. The telltale precipitate formation had confirmed thallium's distinctive reaction pattern. "How exactly did you test for this?" asked Dr. Winters, the team's lead toxicologist, his voice a mixture of skepticism and dawning respect. "A sodium rhodizonate reaction," Angela replied, without a flicker of hesitation. "Modified for field testing with limited resources. The color change is unmistakable when thallium ions are present." Dr. Winters's eyebrows shot up. He was impressed, despite himself. That's an advanced qualitative analysis technique. It's rarely used outside of specialized labs. It was covered in advanced toxicology methods, a second-year special topics course, Angela responded calmly. Professor Harrison's class. A flicker of recognition crossed several of the older doctors' faces. Harrison was a Johns Hopkins legend. You were his student? Dr. Park asked, his voice filled with awe. For 1 semester, Angela answered, the old, familiar ache of that loss briefly visible in her eyes. Before I had to withdraw. Dr. Reynolds, his arrogance finally cracking, examined her improvised test results with a grudging, focused attention. His expertise was vast, but he couldn't deny the logic of the evidence before him, however unorthodox its source. The concentration pattern suggests a deliberate, sustained exposure, Angela continued, pressing her advantage, pointing to her timeline. Each application of the cream delivers a sublethal dose that accumulates in his tissues. The symptoms escalate in perfect correlation with Jefferson Burke's visits. The dynamic in the room had fundamentally shifted. The specialists began firing technical questions at her, and Angela answered each one with precise, scientific terminology. With every correct response, another layer of her invisibility peeled away. They weren't seeing her uniform anymore. They were seeing her mind. Dr. Park pulled up Blackwell's latest lab results on a tablet. If we run a focused mass spectrometry specifically for thallium instead of a general panel, you'll find elevated levels. Angela finished, her voice confident. Particularly if you test hair samples from the past 3 months. They will show you the exact poisoning timeline. The room's energy had transformed from tense frustration to focused urgency. The dismissive, hierarchical barrier had shattered. In this room, at this moment, knowledge had proven more powerful than credentials. Run a focused thallium test, immediately, Dr. Reynolds ordered, his voice strained. 2 specialists practically ran from the room to comply, taking a sample of the hand cream from the nightstand and preparing for a new blood draw. Dr. Reynolds stood frozen for a moment, staring at Angela's methodical evidence. His expression cycled through disbelief, dawning realization, and a final, reluctant acknowledgement. If you're correct, he finally said, the words seeming to physically pain him. We've been exacerbating his condition. Some of our treatments. The chelation therapy you were using for suspected mercury poisoning would be ineffective against thallium, Angela confirmed quietly. He needs Prussian blue, immediately. It binds with the thallium and allows it to be expelled from the body. The specialists exchanged glances, their minds recalibrating years of training. A nurse burst back into the room minutes later, breathless. Rush toxicology confirms, she announced, her voice trembling slightly. Thallium. Significant, critical levels. The room erupted in a storm of controlled chaos. Orders flew. Treatment protocols were instantly shifted. Security was contacted regarding Jefferson Burke. Check the security footage, Angela suggested, her voice cutting through the noise. For the deliveries of the hand cream, Burke likely applied some himself on camera to establish his trust in the product. Dr. Park nodded, already on his phone. Already requested. He looked at her, his expression one of pure amazement. But how did you... The pattern was clear once I looked for it, Angela explained simply. Mr. Burke always brought the same gift. Mr. Blackwell's condition always worsened afterward. Sometimes the simplest answer is the right one. An officer from hospital security entered. We've reviewed the footage. Burke is seen manipulating the new jars of cream when he believes he's alone in the room. We've contacted the FBI. The Prussian blue treatment was administered. Additional blood work came back, confirming Angela's diagnosis down to every last detail. The room's atmosphere transformed from one of desperate resignation to one of focused, determined hope. 3 hours later, Victor Blackwell's vital signs stabilized for the first time in weeks. Amidst the medical flurry, Angela stood quietly by the wall, her presence momentarily forgotten. Dr. Reynolds approached her, his tall frame seeming less imposing now, his certainty stripped away. "Your intervention was—" He paused, visibly struggling with the words. "Correct, completely correct." Angela simply nodded, maintaining her professional composure despite the flood of validation washing through her. "How?" he asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "How did you see what 20 of us missed?" "I'm invisible," Angela replied, the words holding no bitterness, only fact. "I observe without being observed. I see patterns without the burden of preconceived theories. And I never forgot my training, even when life took me away from it." Dr. Reynolds nodded slowly. "I owe you an apology," he said, the words quiet but clear. "We all do." Before he could continue, one of the monitors indicated that Blackwell was regaining consciousness. The room hushed as the billionaire's eyes fluttered open for the first time in days. "What?" Blackwell whispered, his voice a dry rasp. "Happened?" Dr. Reynolds stood at his bedside. A critical moment of choice played across his face. Claim the victory or acknowledge the truth. He straightened his shoulders. "You were being poisoned, Mr. Blackwell. With thallium. We missed it. All of us." He turned and gestured toward Angela, still standing by the wall. "This is Angela Beaumont. She solved what 20 of the world's best specialists couldn't." A profound silence filled the room. Every eye, every multi-million-dollar intellect, turned to the housekeeper. Blackwell's weak gaze found hers. "Thank you," he whispered, the words faint but filled with a universe of gratitude. "For seeing me when they couldn't." The silence broke as Dr. Park began to applaud, a slow, steady clap. One by one, others joined in, until the sound of applause for the housekeeper filled the multi-million-dollar suite. It was an acknowledgement impossible to dismiss. Angela stood a little taller, her expertise finally, undeniably visible. "Sometimes the most valuable knowledge," she said quietly, to no one and everyone, "isn't framed on a wall." The momentary triumph was interrupted as 2 FBI agents arrived, their expressions professional and focused. They spoke briefly with hospital security, then requested statements from key personnel. That included Angela. "We need to understand exactly how you identified the poisoning, Ms. Beaumont," Agent Ramirez explained, treating her with the same deference she afforded the specialists. "I recognized the symptom pattern from my toxicology training," Angela explained calmly, "and then confirmed my hypothesis through chemical testing." "And your background is in chemistry?" the agent asked, looking at her uniform. "An incomplete degree. I was forced to withdraw for family reasons." The agent nodded, his expression not dismissive but impressed. "Your observation may have saved Mr. Blackwell's life and provided the crucial evidence we need for prosecution." As the federal investigation intensified, the medical staff continued administering the antidote. Angela watched as Blackwell's vital signs on the monitor strengthened hour by hour, tangible proof of her diagnosis. Dr. Park approached and offered her a chair. "You should sit. You've been standing since this all began." The simple courtesy, offering a seat to someone usually expected to remain standing and unobtrusive, symbolized the tectonic shift that had just occurred. "Thank you," Angela accepted quietly. "Your chemistry background?" Dr. Park asked, sitting beside her. "What was your focus?" "Toxicology and organic analysis," she replied. "I was researching new detection methods for environmental contaminants." "You would have made an exceptional diagnostician," he observed, shaking his head in wonder. "Life had other plans," she responded, without a trace of self-pity. As evening approached, Angela prepared to complete her regular duties, a creature of habit. Dr. Reynolds intercepted her near the supply closet. "Ms. Beaumont," he began awkwardly, "hospital administration has been informed of your contribution. They've authorized paid administrative leave while you assist the FBI with their investigation." The subtext was clear. They couldn't have someone who had just demonstrated such world-class expertise returning immediately to cleaning floors. The status quo had been irreparably disrupted. Angela nodded, understanding the complex recalibration occurring within the hospital's rigid hierarchy. "I'll finish my current duties first." Dr. Reynolds looked startled, then nodded with a newfound respect. As she completed her shift, Angela noticed the atmosphere had changed. There were nods of acknowledgement from doctors who had previously looked through her. There were congratulatory smiles from nurses. Her invisibility had been permanently shattered. When she finally left the hospital that night, Angela paused in the parking lot and looked up at the illuminated windows of Victor Blackwell's suite. Inside, a man was alive because of her. The thought brought not pride, but a quiet, clean satisfaction. The simple, profound rightness of truth revealed. The FBI moved swiftly. Jefferson Burke was taken into custody. Initial questioning revealed a motive of desperate corporate espionage, a slow, insidious poisoning designed to incapacitate Blackwell and force him to step down before a massive merger, allowing Burke's company to swoop in. Back at the hospital, Angela found herself in a small conference room, recounting her observations to federal agents who treated her not as a housekeeper, but as a key witness and expert consultant. "You identified the poison, the delivery method, and the suspect through observation alone," Agent Martinez clarified, her pen poised over her notes, her tone one of undisguised admiration. "I combined observation with chemical testing and my background knowledge," Angela corrected gently. "The pattern was clear once I knew what to look for." "You saved a life and caught a would-be murderer, Ms. Beaumont," the agent stated. When the interview concluded, Angela stepped into a subtly transformed world. Nurses nodded. Doctors made eye contact. The whispers that followed her down the hall were no longer about hospital gossip, but about her. That's her, the one who outsmarted 20 doctors. She worked her shift with the same quiet efficiency, but her invisible shield had dissolved. People saw her now. Over the following days, the hospital administration grappled with an unprecedented problem. Her job title was still Environmental Services Technician, but she was repeatedly being consulted by the toxicology department on Blackwell's recovery. At home, she explained the situation to her children. "So you solved a mystery the doctors couldn't?" Marcus asked, his 12-year-old eyes wide with wonder. "I noticed something they overlooked," Angela corrected. "Sometimes being in a different position lets you see things others miss." Tasha, more perceptive at 14, understood the deeper implications. "Will things change now, Mom? Will they respect you?" Angela considered it. "Respect isn't given permanently," she said. "It's earned. But yes, something has shifted." A week after her diagnosis, Angela was summoned to the administrative offices. The hospital's chief of medicine, Dr. Eleanor Matthews, greeted her not as an employee, but as a colleague. "Ms. Beaumont, your actions have placed this institution in an unusual position," Dr. Matthews began, choosing her words carefully. "You demonstrated exceptional medical knowledge while working in a non-medical capacity. The administration's dilemma was obvious. They couldn't ignore her, but fully acknowledging her would mean admitting the systemic flaws and prejudices that had kept her invisible for so long. The board has authorized a commendation and a significant bonus," Matthews continued, "and we would like to discuss potential opportunities here at the hospital that might better utilize your scientific background." It was a carefully calibrated offer, recognition without revolution. "I appreciate that," Angela replied evenly. "Mr. Blackwell has also expressed his interest in speaking with you once he's sufficiently recovered." A month later, a message that felt like it was from another reality arrived. Victor Blackwell requested her presence at his corporate headquarters downtown. She took time off, dressed in her best non-uniform clothes, and entered the gleaming steel and glass tower of Blackwell Innovations. Unlike the hospital, where she had navigated the corridors like a ghost, here she was escorted with deference. The executive floor was a world of quiet power. A recovered Blackwell, thinner, paler but crackling with a renewed energy, rose from behind a vast mahogany desk. "Ms. Beaumont?" He greeted her, his voice firm. "Please sit. I've wanted to thank you properly since I regained full consciousness." Angela sat, acutely aware of the surreal role reversal. The man whose room she had once cleaned was now offering her a seat in his inner sanctum. "I'm glad you're recovering well, sir," she said. "Recovering understates it," he said, his eyes intense. "I'm alive, because you saw what no one else did." He studied her for a long moment. "Dr. Reynolds explained your background. Chemistry prodigy, scholarship student, education cut short by family tragedy." Angela was surprised they had delved so deep. She simply nodded. "Intelligence like yours shouldn't be wasted," Blackwell continued, his voice resonating with purpose. "I've spent the last month establishing a foundation. Its mission is to support brilliant minds who have faced financial and systemic barriers to education. You were the inspiration. You will be its first recipient." Wuton. He slid a thick folder across the desk. Inside was the documentation for a full scholarship to complete her chemistry degree and pursue her master's at Johns Hopkins. It included a living stipend, full childcare coverage, and a guaranteed placement in the Sterling Heights Toxicology Department upon graduation. "This isn't charity, Ms. Beaumont," Blackwell clarified, seeing the shock on her face. "It's an investment in exceptional talent. The hospital has already approved your position. Part-time during your studies, full-time after you graduate. Frankly, they're rather eager to have your expertise officially on their payroll." Angela's fingers traced the edge of the documents. Dreams she had buried under 15 years of grief and duty were suddenly, tangibly real. "My children," she began, the practical worries still present. "The stipend covers everything," Blackwell assured her. "All the obstacles have been addressed. The only question is, are you ready to reclaim the path you were forced to leave?" That evening, Angela sat with her children and explained how their lives were about to change. "You saved a billionaire, Mom?" Marcus asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "I used knowledge I never stopped building," she corrected gently. "And now, we have a new chapter ahead." 2 weeks later, Angela walked through the main doors of Johns Hopkins University. Not the service entrance, but the grand main doors. She had a student ID in her hand for her morning classes and her new hospital intern badge for her afternoon work in the toxicology lab. In the hallways, Dr. Reynolds would nod stiffly at her, a gesture of professional courtesy that had replaced his former dismissal. Dr. Park became a friend and an advocate, helping her navigate the transition from support staff to specialist in training. On her first day assisting with a difficult toxicology case, Angela stood in the laboratory, surrounded by the gleaming equipment she had once only been allowed to dust. The crisp, white lab coat felt both foreign and completely natural. The weight of a dream deferred, but never denied. She picked up the patient file and began her analysis, bringing to the problem not just her scientific training, but the unique, hard-won perspective of someone who had learned to see what everyone else overlooked. Someone who understood that wisdom could be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the most valuable insights come from those society has trained itself not to see. The journey wasn't seamless. Old hierarchies die hard. But Angela met every challenge with a quiet dignity, letting her brilliant work speak for itself. The Blackwell Foundation, inspired by her story, flourished, identifying other talented people whose potential had been sidelined by life. 6 months later, Angela stood at a podium at a hospital-wide conference on new diagnostic approaches. She looked out at an audience of doctors, including a humbled Dr. Reynolds. "Observation doesn't require credentials," she began, her voice clear and confident. "Sometimes the most valuable insights come from those trained to be invisible, who see what others overlook precisely because they move through the world differently." 1 year after saving Victor Blackwell's life, she attended the inaugural ceremony for the Beaumont Scholarship for Scientific Excellence, a permanent endowment for individuals returning to science after career interruptions. As she stood to acknowledge the applause, she saw Dr. Reynolds in the crowd. Their eyes met. He nodded respectfully, a gesture acknowledging not just her triumph, but his own profound education. 2 years after the diagnosis that changed everything, Angela stood in her graduation gown, 40 years old, her children beaming from the audience. As she received her diploma, completing a circle begun decades earlier, she felt no regret for the winding path. Every dismissal, every hardship, had honed her unique perspective. It had made her who she was. Back in her new office at Sterling Heights, a building she once cleaned, now her professional home, she kept a small, framed photo of herself in her old blue uniform. It was a reminder not of humiliation, but of the unique strength she had gained in the shadows. Her phone rang. It was a consulting request from another hospital, a mysterious new poisoning case. She picked up, ready to apply both her formal training and her hard-won wisdom. Her voice was calm, confident, and carried the weight of someone who had proven her worth beyond all doubt, against all odds. "This is Dr. Beaumont," she answered. "How can I help?" If this story of hidden brilliance and triumphant justice resonated with you, then you are in the right place. Our channel, Beat Stories, is dedicated to bringing you these powerful narratives of underdog victories and the overlooked genius that exists all around us. We believe in the Angelas of the world. Don't miss a single story. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and become part of a community that celebrates the moment when the underestimated finally get the recognition they earned. Thank you for watching.